Frozen, beaten, and alone, an Apache woman reached the rancher's cabin and lived like a queen. The night was so cold that even the stars looked sharp. Wind moved across the land like a living thing, cutting through skin and bone. Far from any town, far from any road, an Apache woman walked alone. Her steps were slow and uneven, as if each one cost her more strength than the last. Her clothes were torn and thin, not made for winter. Her hands shook, not only from the cold but from exhaustion that went deep into her body. She did not remember how long she had been walking. Time had lost its meaning. The moon rose and sank behind clouds, and the land stayed the same: rocks, dry grass covered in frost, and long shadows that looked like watching eyes. Her feet were numb. Sometimes she did not feel the ground at all, only the pressure when she fell and pushed herself back up again. She had learned to survive from a young age. She had crossed deserts in heat so strong it burned the air. She had endured hunger, fear, and loss. But this night was different. The cold was not something she could fight with strength alone. It crept into her bones and slowed her thoughts. Her breath came out in short clouds that vanished too quickly, like promises that could not stay. Every few steps, her vision blurred. The world tilted, then straightened again. She focused on one thing only: move forward. Stop and it would be over. Sit down and she would never stand again. She whispered words her mother had once taught her, words for courage, words for staying awake. Her voice was so weak that even she could barely hear it. Pain lived in her body, quiet but constant. Not sharp, not loud, just there. It reminded her of what she had already survived, and of how close she was to losing everything. She had been driven away, left with nothing but her will. No fire, no food, no shelter, just the land and the hope that somewhere ahead there might be a place where the wind could not reach her. She thought of her childhood, of warmer nights by a fire, of stories told by elders whose voices were strong and steady. She remembered laughter and the sound of feet moving in rhythm during dances. Those memories felt like they belonged to another person. The woman walking through the cold felt older than her years, shaped by loss and silence. Her legs gave out without warning. One moment she was walking, the next she was on her knees. The frozen ground burned like ice against her skin. She tried to stand, but her body refused. For a moment she stayed there, bent forward, her hair falling around her face. Snow had begun to fall, soft at first, then thicker, clinging to her clothes. A dangerous thought came to her then. It would be easy to lie down, easy to let the cold take over, easy to rest. Her eyes closed for just a second, and in that second warmth seemed possible again. But something inside her pushed back. Not fear, not panic, something quieter, a deep, stubborn need to live. She opened her eyes and saw it. At first she thought it was a trick of her mind. A small glow far away, barely visible through the falling snow. She blinked, afraid it would disappear, but it stayed. A steady light low to the ground, not a star, not the moon. A light made by human hands, a cabin. The sight gave her strength she did not know she still had. She pulled herself up, using a rock for support. Her legs shook so badly she thought they might fail again, but she forced them forward. Each step was slow. The light did not seem to get closer, and she feared it never would. The wind grew louder as she moved into open land. It pushed against her, trying to turn her away. Snow filled her eyes. She lowered her head and walked by memory, by instinct, by faith in that small glow ahead. Her thoughts became simple. Step, breathe, step again. She did not know who lived in the cabin. She did not know if they would help her or turn her away. She did not know if reaching that door would save her life or end it. But there was no other choice. The land behind her held nothing. The land ahead held a chance. As she drew closer, shapes began to form. The dark outline of walls, a roof heavy with snow, smoke rising thinly from a small opening at the top. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant warmth. Warmth meant life. Her body trembled harder now, reacting to the promise of safety. Tears froze on her cheeks as they fell. She had not cried earlier. There had been no energy for it. Now emotion broke through the numbness. Relief mixed with fear, hope mixed with doubt. The last few steps felt endless. Her boots, worn thin, slipped on ice. She caught herself on the side of the cabin, her fingers scraping against rough wood. The wall felt solid, real. She leaned into it, pressing her forehead against the cold boards, breathing in the smell of smoke and earth. The door was only a few steps away. Her hand lifted, but it shook so badly she could not knock. She tried again. Her knuckles brushed the wood, making a sound so soft she doubted anyone inside could hear it. Panic rose in her chest. She gathered what little strength remained and struck the door once more, harder this time. The effort cost her everything. Her knees folded, and she slid down until she was sitting against the door. The world dimmed around the edges. Sounds grew distant, as if she were sinking underwater. She rested her cheek against the wood, feeling faint warmth on the other side. If anyone is there, she thought, though she could not speak, please. Her eyes closed. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly. A man sat near it, unaware that life and death rested on the other side of his door. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering footprints, covering pain, covering the long path she had walked. She did not know if the door would open, but she had reached it. And that, in itself, was a victory. The fire inside the cabin burned low, steady and quiet. The rancher had finished his simple meal and was cleaning a cup when a sound reached him through the wind. At first he thought it was only the storm, the way it pushed against the walls and made the wood speak. He stood still, listening. The sound came again, softer this time, almost like someone touching the door by mistake. He frowned and moved closer to the door. People did not come this far in winter, not travelers, not neighbors. Anyone with sense stayed close to town when the cold came. He rested his hand on the latch, unsure. The land had taught him caution. Out here, surprises were rarely good. Then he heard it again, a faint thump followed by nothing. Slowly he opened the door. Cold air rushed inside, sharp and biting. Snow swirled at his feet. At first he saw nothing but white and darkness. Then his eyes lowered and he saw her. She was slumped against the door, her body still, her hair dark against the snow. For a moment he thought she was already gone. His chest tightened. He knelt down quickly and placed 2 fingers near her neck. A weak pulse met his touch. She was alive. He did not think any more after that. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt, like she had already given up much of herself to the cold. He carried her inside and closed the door with his foot, shutting out the wind. He laid her near the fire, not too close, remembering old lessons about warming slowly. He fetched blankets and wrapped them around her, one, then another. Her skin was cold to the touch, colder than he had ever felt on a living person. For a long time he just watched her breathe. Her face was marked by exhaustion. There was dirt on her cheeks, and old pain in the lines around her eyes, even though she was still young. He had seen people from many walks of life pass through this land, but he had never seen someone arrive like this, silent, broken by the weather, yet still holding on. He set a pot of water near the fire and waited for it to warm. When it was ready, he dipped a cloth and gently wiped her hands and face. She did not wake, but her breathing changed, becoming a little steadier. The hours passed slowly. Outside, the storm eased, but the cold stayed. Inside, the fire glowed brighter as he fed it more wood. He did not leave her side. Near dawn, she stirred. Her eyes opened suddenly, wide and dark, filled with fear. She tried to move, but her body did not obey her. A sound caught in her throat, halfway between a breath and a cry. "It's all right," the rancher said softly, holding his hands where she could see them. "You're safe, you're inside." She did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. Still, fear ruled her. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the walls, the fire, the strange objects. Her breathing quickened. He stayed where he was, giving her space. He had learned long ago that rushing someone only made things worse. Slowly, her gaze returned to him. She watched him closely as if measuring danger. He pointed to the fire, then to her, then made a simple motion of warmth with his hands. She followed the movement, her eyes narrowing slightly as understanding began to form. Her breathing slowed. Exhaustion claimed her again and her eyes closed. When she woke the second time, the light in the cabin had changed. The fire was still burning, but sunlight now filtered through the small window, pale and weak. She felt warmth for the first time in what felt like forever. Not just from the fire, but from the blankets wrapped around her. She moved her fingers. They responded, slowly, stiffly, but they moved. The rancher sat at the small table, carving a piece of wood with a knife. He looked up when he sensed movement and set the knife down at once. He brought her a cup of warm water and held it out. She hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. The water spilled a little, but she managed to drink some. It tasted plain, but to her it felt rich. He watched her carefully, noticing how she held herself, how her eyes never fully relaxed. She was alert even in weakness, like someone used to danger. He respected that. They did not speak much. Language stood between them like a wall. Still, small things passed between them, nods, careful gestures, quiet patience. He offered her food, soft and warm. She ate slowly, each bite deliberate as if she feared it might disappear. When she finished, she lowered her eyes, a sign of thanks. Days passed like this. Outside, winter held the land in silence. Inside, life found a fragile rhythm. He helped her sit up, then stand. She moved carefully, leaning on the table at first, then managing a few steps on her own. Each small success brought a flicker of pride to her face. At night, sleep did not come easily for her. She woke often, her body tense, her eyes searching the shadows. The rancher noticed and kept the fire burning a little brighter. He did not ask questions. He knew some stories needed time before they could be told. One night she spoke. It was only a few words, quiet and uncertain in her own language. He did not understand them, but he understood their weight. He listened without interrupting, his face calm, his presence steady. When she finished, she looked at him, waiting. He placed a hand over his heart and nodded. That was all. Something shifted then. Trust did not arrive suddenly. It grew slowly, like the fire when new wood was added. She began to help where she could, folding blankets, sweeping the floor. He let her, knowing that doing something, anything, helped bring strength back. He gave her clothes that were too large but warm. She accepted them with quiet dignity. He never stared, never made her feel like she owed him anything. This mattered more than words. One morning she stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered land. Her reflection stared back at her, thinner, tired but alive. She touched the glass lightly, as if testing whether this new world was real. The rancher watched her from across the room. He knew winter was not yet over, and neither was her journey. But she had crossed the hardest line already, the line between being alone and being found. Outside, the wind moved over the land again, but inside the cabin, something steady had taken root. And for the first time since she had begun walking through the cold, she did not feel alone. Healing did not move in a straight line. Some mornings she woke with more strength. Other mornings she felt weak again, as if the cold had returned to claim her. The rancher noticed everything. He noticed how she paused before sitting, how she moved slowly near doorways, how sudden sounds made her shoulders tighten. He did not ask questions. He understood that pain did not always come from the body alone. Each day, he added small routines to help her regain strength. He showed her how to pour water without spilling, how to keep balance while standing near the fire, how to stretch stiff hands in the warmth. He spoke slowly, using the same words again and again, pointing, repeating, letting meaning grow naturally. She listened carefully, watching his mouth, his hands, learning bit by bit. Sometimes she tried to speak back in his language. The words came out broken, mixed with her own. When she struggled, frustration crossed her face and she turned away. He never corrected her sharply. He only waited, patient as the land itself. At night, sleep still fought her. Dreams came heavy and unwelcome. She woke breathing fast, her heart racing, her hands clutching the blankets as if they could slip away. On those nights, she sat near the fire until the shaking passed. The rancher pretended to sleep in his chair nearby, though his eyes stayed open, watching quietly. He never touched her unless she clearly needed support. When he did, his movements were slow and careful, always visible, always respectful. This taught her something deeper than words ever could. One afternoon, when the sun broke through the clouds and warmed the cabin slightly, she surprised him by stepping outside. The snow reflected light so bright it made her squint. She stood still at first, breathing in the sharp air, steadying herself. The land stretched wide and open before her. No walls, no crowds, no watching eyes, just space. Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something close to relief. She bent and touched the snow. It burned her fingers slightly, reminding her that the world was still real, still demanding. She smiled faintly, the first real smile since her arrival. From that day on, she insisted on doing more. She swept the cabin each morning. She learned where the food was kept and helped prepare meals. Her movements grew surer, her steps stronger, yet healing carried its own weight. There were moments when she froze without warning, a loud sound outside, a shadow passing the window. In those moments, her mind traveled somewhere else. Her eyes lost focus. Her breath shortened. The rancher learned to recognize those signs. He spoke her name gently, repeating it until she returned. He never raised his voice. He never rushed her. Slowly, those moments passed more quickly each time. One evening, she sat across from him at the table and tried to explain something important. She pointed to herself, then made a pushing motion outward. She shook her head. Then she pointed to the land outside, her face serious. He understood enough to know she was telling him she had nowhere else to go. Not now, maybe not ever. He nodded once. He did not offer promises. He did not make grand gestures. He simply said, "You can stay." The words were simple. Their meaning was not. That night she slept longer than she had in weeks. As her strength returned, her presence changed the cabin. She rearranged small things, placing them where they felt right. She cleaned with care, turning the rough space into something warmer. She braided her hair each morning, standing taller, carrying herself with quiet pride. She began humming softly while she worked. The sound filled the cabin gently, like a memory slowly returning to life. The rancher listened without comment, but the music stayed with him long after it stopped. Sometimes, when the work was done, they sat together in silence. Not the heavy silence of fear or distance, but an easy one, the kind that comes when words are no longer needed. One afternoon, she brought out a small object she had kept hidden in her clothing. It was worn smooth from years of handling. She placed it on the table between them. She tapped it, then touched her chest. "This," she said slowly, using his language as best she could. He looked at it carefully, then back at her. He nodded, understanding it was important. He did not ask where it came from. Some things deserved to remain sacred. The days grew longer. The cold began to loosen its grip. Snow melted in patches, revealing earth beneath. Life stirred quietly across the land. With the change in weather came new challenges. Visitors might come. Questions might be asked. The safety of isolation would not last forever. She sensed this too. One morning, she stood by the door longer than usual, looking out. Her face held a mix of calm and readiness. Whatever came next, she would face it standing, not crawling. The rancher met her gaze. He saw the strength that had always been there, now uncovered. Healing had not erased her past. It had not softened her into something fragile. It had shaped her into something steady. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both understood that what they were building was not charity, not rescue, but something earned, step by step, day by day. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. And so did she. Spring arrived quietly, almost carefully, as if the land itself did not want to disturb what had been built through the long winter. Snow pulled back day by day, leaving dark earth behind. Small plants appeared where nothing had lived before. The air softened. Light stayed longer. Inside the cabin, change had already taken root. She woke before sunrise now, not from fear but from habit. Her body had found a rhythm again. She folded her blankets neatly, swept the floor, and prepared the morning fire before the rancher rose. When he stepped into the main room, he often found warmth already waiting for him. At first he protested, shaking his head, trying to stop her. But she only smiled and continued. Work to her was not a burden. It was a way to stand tall again. She learned the patterns of the cabin quickly, where tools belonged, how much water was needed for each task, when the fire needed feeding. The space no longer felt borrowed. It felt lived in. The rancher noticed how the cabin itself seemed different, cleaner, brighter, calmer. Not because she worked harder than he did, but because she cared in a way he had forgotten was possible. She did not rush through tasks. She did them with intention. When she spoke now, her words came more clearly. Still simple, still mixed with her own language, but understandable. Each sentence was a small victory. He never corrected her in front of mistakes. He listened. He responded. That was enough. Some afternoons she went outside alone. She walked the land slowly, learning its shape, its moods. She watched the animals from a distance, respecting their space. She felt the ground beneath her feet and remembered who she was before fear had taken so much. She returned each time stronger. One day a traveler passed near the cabin, just a figure in the distance moving across the open land. She froze when she saw him, her breath caught, her hands clenched. The rancher noticed immediately. He stood beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. The traveler did not come closer. He passed and disappeared into the distance. Still, the moment lingered. That night she sat quietly by the fire, her eyes fixed on the flames. After a long silence she spoke, slowly, carefully. She shared pieces of her story, not in detail, not fully, but enough. Enough to explain why trust had been hard, why safety had felt impossible. The rancher listened without judgment. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he nodded once, his face serious. "You are safe here," he said. The words were not loud. They did not promise the world, but they were real. Something changed after that. She no longer moved like a guest waiting to leave. She moved like someone who belonged, not owned, not trapped, belonged by choice. She began to take charge of things without asking, planning meals, storing supplies, suggesting changes to make life easier. The rancher accepted her ideas with respect. He saw her not as someone he had helped, but as someone who stood equal beside him. People did begin to notice. A neighbor stopped by one afternoon, curious. The rancher greeted him calmly. She stood inside the cabin, listening. Her heart raced, but she did not hide. When the neighbor saw her, his eyes widened slightly. He said nothing rude, nothing unkind, but curiosity hung in the air. "This is my home," she said, her voice steady, her words clear enough. The rancher nodded. "She stays because she chooses to." The neighbor accepted this and left without trouble. That night she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Pride. She began to dress with care. Not to impress, not to prove anything, but because she wanted to. Clean clothes, hair neatly braided, shoulders back, eyes lifted. The rancher noticed how she carried herself now. There was authority in her movements, quiet, unspoken strength. She did not demand respect. She naturally received it. One evening she laughed. The sound surprised them both. It came suddenly, soft at first, then stronger. The rancher looked at her, stunned. She covered her mouth, eyes wide, then laughed again, this time without stopping. It felt like breaking through ice. From that day on, joy returned in small ways, shared meals, quiet smiles, comfortable silence. The cabin became more than shelter. It became a place of peace. She was no longer just surviving. She was leading her own life again. When spring fully arrived, the land outside bloomed. The cabin stood firm at the center of it all, not grand, not rich, but strong. and within it lived a woman who had once crawled through snow, now standing with dignity, warmth, and choice. She was not treated as weak. She was treated like a queen, not because of luxury but because of respect, and that changed everything. Summer came slowly, but when it arrived, it filled the land with color and sound. Grass grew tall around the cabin. Birds returned to the trees. The air carried warmth instead of sharp cold. The world felt open again. She stood outside one morning, feeling the sun on her face, and realized something important. She was no longer counting days just to survive them. She was planning them. Life at the cabin had become steady. She and the rancher worked together without needing to explain much. He handled the heavy tasks. She managed the rest with care and confidence. They moved around each other easily, like two people who trusted the space between them. Sometimes people came by, a neighbor, a traveler. Each visit tested the quiet peace they had built. Each time she stood tall, she spoke when needed. She stayed silent when silence was wiser. No one questioned her place anymore. Word spread quietly. People said the rancher had changed. They said his land felt different, more alive. He did not argue, he knew why. She had brought balance back into his life, though neither of them had planned it. One evening, as the sun dropped low, she sat outside with him, watching shadows stretch across the land. The sky turned soft shades of orange and gold. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She told him she had once believed her life was finished. That night in the snow had felt like an ending. She had not expected anything beyond it. He listened, his eyes on the horizon. "But," she said, touching her chest lightly, "I am still here." He nodded. "You are strong." She shook her head gently. "I was allowed to be strong." The words stayed between them, heavy with meaning. As the seasons continued to turn, she faced a choice she had known would come. The world beyond the cabin still existed. There were paths she could take, people she could seek, a future that might call her elsewhere. The rancher never tried to stop her. He never asked her to stay. He understood that real respect meant freedom. One morning she packed a small bundle, not because she was leaving that day, but because she needed to know she could. She set it near the door and left it there. Days passed, then weeks. The bundle remained untouched. She realized something then. Home was not a place she had to earn. It was a place she chose. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and sure. "I will stay," she said. "This is my life now." The rancher looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, not wide, not loud, just enough. Life moved forward. They planted more than they needed. They fixed what was broken. They shared stories, slowly filling the silence with pieces of the past and hopes for the future. She became known not for where she came from, but for who she was. A woman of strength, a woman of wisdom, a woman who stood without fear. Years later, when others asked about her, no one spoke of the night she arrived frozen and alone. They spoke of the woman who walked the land with confidence, who carried herself with grace, who lived fully and freely. She had not been rescued. She had been respected, and that made all the difference. The cabin still stood, strong against wind and time. Inside it lived two lives changed by one open door, one choice, one act of quiet humanity. The woman who had once crawled through snow now ruled her life with calm power, not because she owned anything, but because she owned herself.